Welcome to Diligent Canine, and in this episode of Reflections, I am going to talk about money. Specifically, I'm going to talk about what I found for myself to be some good ways to stay frugal when you're raising a dog, and some areas where it's worth the money to go the extra mile. Of course, you can overpay for just about anything. That's the way commerce tends to work. If somebody is willing to pay more for the same product, people will certainly, or companies will certainly charge more for the same product. So, that being said, let's get into it. We'll start with some good places to save money with your dog. And the first thing that I can think of is clothing. Your dogs don't need clothes. They are covered in fur. If you're in a particularly severe climate, be that cold or warm, then you should take that into consideration when you adopt a dog. It doesn't make a lot of sense in that regard to adopt or purchase a husky in Florida, much like it doesn't make sense to get a short-haired or hairless breed and try to raise it in Michigan. So you don't need clothes for your dog. And again, I will say up front that it's totally okay, and you will probably find, as I found, that you upgrade some of this equipment, some of these things later on down the road. But the initial investment of getting a dog can be expensive, so that's why I'm putting this video out. The other thing where you can save a lot of money is with toys. Specifically, don't buy toys from your big box pet stores. You simply don't need them, and they're overpriced anyway, and the quality is oftentimes questionable at best. So you can find a lot of toys to make yourself. For the longest time, I rolled up a t-shirt to play tug with my dog, and after that, rather than buying linen or rolled tug toys, I went to the hardware store and bought a couple feet of 3/4 inch or 1/2 inch hemp rope and tied knots in the end of that and used that to play tug. Cost me a fraction of the cost as tugs at retail stores. The other thing is, when you buy toys for your dog, you can focus on just a couple toys that have a very high effect. So you don't need, and you shouldn't have, a huge box of toys that your dog can just go into whenever they want. You should be the one to control that. Really, they should be your toys that the dog gets to use when you decide it's time for them to use. So some high effect toys would be ones that either manage the dog's behavior, that is, occupy the dog's time, so sort of puzzle toys. Kongs are the best example as I can think of, because of course you can play fetch with it, the dog can chew it. If you fill a Kong with peanut butter and put it in your freezer for a couple hours or overnight, it will take quite a while, even for heavy chewers, to get through that and get every last bit out of the inside. So other high value or high effect toys would be things like tennis balls, things that engage you and the dog together. So fetch paraphernalia, tug paraphernalia, those kind of things are really good to have a foundation. So I would get a Kong, some sort of ball for fetch, and some sort of tugging toy to start out. The other thing that you can save some money on is grooming. So you should also take this into consideration when you get a dog, what the maintenance requirements are for the dog's grooming needs, and you can do that yourself. So, things like brushing, bathing, trimming their nails, that stuff you can and should do yourself. I talked about that in another video, how it builds the bond with you and your dog. The other thing you can save some money on is the daily sort of stuff, the daily living needs for the dog. So things like beds, bowls. To this day, my dog still drinks out of a extra large Tupperware. You don't need anything fancy. The automatic water things, water cooler jugs, they're kind of convenient because they fill up the bowl for you. Automatic feeders, I don't recommend. Not that there's anything wrong with the product, but there's a lot to be said. Like I have said in training videos about hand feeding your dog, using food to train your dog, using your dog's meal times to train, things like that. The other things you can save some money on, especially initially, and of course upgrade later, are things like leashes and collars, especially when you're talking about just a regular walking leash and a flat collar. Those don't need to be anything special. When it comes to training equipment, or if you have a specific sporting need, that is a little different. I'll get into that in a minute. You also want to consider crates and brushes, clippers, like I said, those sort of like grooming things. You probably don't want to go with the cheapest thing because it's probably cheaper made. I have found that to be true, definitely. But something middle range, something that is congruent with the size of your dog. If you have a large dog, get the large clippers, get ones that look like they're heavy duty and they're not going to bust. Same thing with brushes. You want to make sure you're getting the right tools for the job, but you definitely don't need to go overboard right away, especially if you're keeping up on regular maintenance grooming with your dog. It's less of an ordeal each time you do it if you're doing it more frequently. I will say with crates though, you want to make sure it's something that will work for your dog. So obviously it has to be the right size. Your dog should be able to stand up and turn around in it without touching the sides or the roof. That is for wire crates. For containment. It also needs to be durable though, so depending on like how high drive or how anxious or how big or strong your dog is, there are some pretty flimsy wire crates out there that the strong high drive dogs will absolutely demolish. So let's get into some areas where it's not a good idea to cut costs or cut corners. And the most obvious one to me is food. And I mentioned that in the Q&A video about food. It's the thing that your dog is going to do the most. It's going to eat. It's going to eat every day, and it's going to eat a lot. And that stuff is going inside its body, out. So it has that very high effect. Food is also the area where it's the easiest to overpay. So the best solution here is just to educate yourself. Get the best food that you can afford. Pay attention to the ingredients. Watch the video about food. That's why I made it. The other thing to consider for saving money and when not to do it is the actual adoption fee or the purchase price of the dog. So lots of rescues will keep dogs shelters will keep dogs up to date on their shots. They'll be spay or neutered, and they'll be a little cheaper. Next up, you have rescue organizations, and they could be several times more expensive than a shelter, but hopefully that dog has some training or some kind of socialization, at least with people, and probably with other dogs too. So you're getting a little more for that. And obviously you're going to pay the most when you buy from a breeder. No reputable breeder is going to sell dogs online. If you are buying from Craigslist, you are buying from a backyard breeder, no matter what they say. No reputable breeder is going to resort to Craigslist. Remember that.